She fixed what no one else could but first. They handed her a mop. "We don't need another janitor. We need a technician. But since you're already here, you can start with that floor." The words, slick with sarcasm, dripped from Master Sergeant Blake Coulter's mouth like motor oil on glass. A few younger cadets standing nearby Falcon Unit 12, bright-eyed and eager to stay in Coulter's favor, let out a ripple of awkward snickers. The woman said nothing. She didn't flinch, didn't even glance in Coulter's direction. She didn't acknowledge the room, the laughter, or the power dynamic he was trying to reinforce. Her gaze was fixed not on anyone, but on the far wall, where the towering vault of the Tier 4 armament cage stood sealed like a monument of failure. Inert, cold, unyielding, without a word. She reached out and took the mop handle he offered, wooden, worn smooth, almost ceremonial. Her grip steady, her face blank. Her silence didn't resist the insult, it absorbed it. Like water vanishing into concrete, but across the cavernous hangar. Someone else noticed. Colonel Raiden Holt, the visiting commander overseeing the strategic deployment drill, paused mid-step. He watched the woman with narrowed eyes. Not because of what she said, but how she moved, how her fingers, bare of polish or ornament, curled around the mop handle with quiet deliberation. He studied her posture, not slouched, not defeated, but perfectly balanced. One foot slightly ahead of the other. Weight distributed like a dancer at parade rest, efficient, controlled. There was something about it. Something old, not outdated, just ancient, disciplined. A flicker of muscle memory from another life, another war. The quiet professional turned away and began to mop. And the only sound that remained in the hangar was the rhythmic whisper of the mop head across polished concrete, a steady swish that cut through the static hum of judgment, tension, and egos. The moment stretched, because the situation wasn't just bad, it was critical. The newly installed Echo-Lock security system on the armament vault had frozen not just offline, but deadlocked. A digital ghost in the machine had shut down access to millions in active targeting pods, munitions, and guidance arrays. The launch prep was already behind schedule for the last 3 hours. Coulter and his techs had thrown everything at it: diagnostics, power cycling, remote overrides, even analog backups. Nothing worked, just one small, blinking red light mocking them from the vault's interface. Coulter's frustration had calcified into anger, and the arrival of this woman sent by some obscure tech division with no name, no rank, no insignia felt like salt in the wound. She didn't look like a specialist. She looked like a mistake, a misfile, a contractor who got lost near the airfield and wandered into classified space. So when he handed her the mop, it wasn't an oversight. It was a message. You don't belong here, and I'm still in charge, but not for long. Her quiet acceptance of the mop hadn't just unsettled Master Sergeant Blake Coulter, it had begun to haunt him. She worked with an unsettling precision. Each stroke of the mop was straight, tight, almost too perfect. Her turns were sharp, deliberate. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation, no anger, just calm, controlled. Unbothered calm, the kind you find not in peaceful people, but in dangerous ones. And under that calm, something deeper stirred like an undercurrent beneath glassy water. A force you couldn't see, but knew was there. Pressure inside Falcon Ridge Hangar 4 mounted with every second. The mission clock was ticking, hard. The sortie was aligned to a satellite uplink window tied to real-time theater operations. Without the Echo-class targeting pods and smart-guided munitions inside that vault, the interceptors waiting on the tarmac were nothing but expensive lawn ornaments. Colonel Raiden Holt, the man who'd seen combat in 9 countries and 5 continents, stepped forward. His boots echoed like a metronome of accountability. "Master Sergeant," he said low, but piercing through the tension like a blade through Kevlar. Status report. The window is closing. Is the specialist you requested making progress? The question wasn't a question. It was a formal warning, the kind that preceded a career-ending memo. Coulter's face flushed. He swallowed pride like sandpaper. "No, sir," he said tightly. "She hasn't started yet." Then, louder, not a command, but something more desperate. "All right, specialist, you're up. Let's see what Command's infinite wisdom sent us." The woman stopped mopping. Not suddenly, just naturally, like a sequence had reached its final step. She turned, walked to the far wall, and leaned the mop against it with surgical care, aligning the handle perfectly vertical before stepping away. She carried no bag, no tablet, no kit, just herself and something no one in the room could quantify. The hangar dropped into silence. She approached the Tier 4 vault, its digital interface still frozen, still flashing that same defiant red. She didn't touch the keypad. She didn't even look at it. Instead, she stepped closer to the vault itself, her fingers drifting just above the steel frame, hovering near the seams where pressure-locked panels met hardened metal. And then she began to trace. Not gently, not tentatively. She ran her fingertips across the vault like a geologist reading tectonic plates, like a blind musician seeking resonance on an unfamiliar instrument. Every movement deliberate, every breath measured. Across the room, even the most seasoned officers felt it, that creeping intuition, that whisper in the bones that said, "This isn't normal. This isn't training. This is something else." It wasn't just her silence. Now it was the way she moved inside it. Like a code was already running, not on the vault, but in her. And no one, not even Coulter, was laughing anymore. Then she began. Not with commands or codes, but with rhythm. A series of precise taps from the heel of her hand, low on the frame, far from the keypad everyone else had failed to crack. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded less like override and more like memory, like someone knocking not to gain access, but to be recognized. Her hand paused. She wasn't listening to the vault, she was listening inward. There had been a time when her name appeared on schematics instead of being redacted. Before Thar Valley, before silence became survival. This wasn't about the mission anymore. It was about being seen not by others, but by the machine she had once breathed life into. She moved with a precision born from exile. Everything about her, the stance, the breath, the tap came from something older than training. They had thought she was a janitor, a misfile, a mistake. Let them. Because while they scrambled with schematics and overrides, she was the one who had buried the language of this system in steel, and now she was speaking it again. Her palm slid across the vault's surface. Not searching, but remembering. She found the seam near the actuator, barely visible even up close, and pressed her index finger into it. Then, with calm finality, she struck a point on the frame, one not listed in any schematic, not recorded in any manual. A deep, resonant sound followed. Not mechanical, not digital, a release. The red indicator light blinked once, then went dark. The vault hissed softly, like it had finally remembered how to breathe. And then it began to open, slowly, steadily, with a kind of reverence. Inside were rows of gleaming guidance systems and smart payloads. 3 hours of failed attempts had yielded nothing. She had done it in under 3 minutes. No tablet, no kit, no rank. Coulter stood frozen, the smart remark dying unspoken. His mouth hung open, not in confusion, in fear. He looked at her, then the door, then back again, trying to process something that didn't fit into his world of checklists and control panels. "There's no manual override," he muttered. "There's no physical access point." He stepped forward, running his hands along the frame, searching for logic where there was only design. There was nothing to find, just steel. And her. She hadn't overridden the vault. She had reminded it who built it, and whatever authority Coulter believed he had in that hangar. Colonel Raiden Holt stepped past the frozen ranks of airmen and the hollow-eyed figure of Master Sergeant Coulter, his boots silent on the concrete. His gaze never left her, not the vault, not the tech, not the payloads now unlocked behind her. He stopped in front of her, and for a long moment, all he did was look, not at her uniform, not at her rank, but at her. Falcon Ridge. He said quietly, then added, almost to himself, I haven't seen the Echo Lock protocol used in 20 years. Not since the Thar Valley siege. The hangar held its breath. He turned to his aide, a young captain holding a slate. Authorization code Sierra Tango 97. Puller record. The captain's fingers danced across the screen, and then paused. His voice dropped. Almost reverent. Sir, the file's nearly empty. Most of it's classified. Clearance Tier 7 Eclipse. Name Dr. Ilara Vance. No listed unit. Just one call sign, Black Viper 1. He swallowed. Then read the only line under Field Competencies Lead Design Architect Echo Lock. Field Integrated Override Specialist. Prototype Author. The air seemed to tighten. The room didn't just go silent, it shrunk. Every man and woman in that hangar who had seen her mop the floor, who had watched her hands trace the steel like a whisper, now saw her for who she was. Not a technician, not a custodian, but the ghost who built the very vault that defied them, and the ghost that had just spoken to it. Coulter's eyes dropped, his jaw clenched, his posture stiff. He wasn't just humiliated, he was recalibrated. Like his world had shifted 10 degrees off axis, and no one warned him gravity was about to change. She hadn't bypassed Echo Lock. She had accessed its original failover, a design hidden in the steel. Never documented, never taught. A back door known only to its maker. And she was that maker. Colonel Holt, a man who had spent 3 decades commanding warfighters and engineers across 5 continents, slowly straightened his posture. He brought his boots together. Hands at his sides, chin raised, not in command but in respect, not with a salute but with stillness. Dr. Vance, he said, voice low but resonating, on behalf of the 91st Tactical Interceptor Wing, thank you. You saved this mission. He turned then, his gaze sweeping across the hangar, until it landed cold and hard on Coulter. The temperature dropped. Master Sergeant, Holt said, voice now tempered steel. Assumptions are the enemy of readiness. He let that hang, then added, true competence doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it carries a mop to see who in the room can lead, and who just wants to be in charge. Nobody laughed, nobody spoke, but from that moment forward, everything felt different. The incident didn't spread like gossip. It moved like weather, a shift in pressure that no one could ignore. They didn't call it a system failure. They called it the Vance directive. It wasn't written down. It passed from hand to hand in tool bays, in briefing rooms, in the quiet between assignments, the kind of story that moves like pressure, not noise. A woman with no insignia had opened what no one else could not with rank, not with force, but with something older than protocol, a memory of how the system had been born. Her hands had once built it, and when no one else could speak to the vault, she reminded it who had given it voice. It became a cautionary tale about assumption, about overlooking the ones who move quietly, who carry their knowledge like shadow, the ones who don't demand attention because they don't need it. As for Master Sergeant Coulter, no reprimand was ever issued, but everyone saw the change. The swagger fell away, the volume dropped, and slowly, he became the kind of leader who listened not because he was forced to, but because he finally understood what he'd missed. Ilara Vance didn't stay for recognition. She found the fault no one else could, submitted the fix in 7 clipped sentences, and left without fanfare. But just before she reached the exit, a young airman, the same one who had laughed the loudest, caught up to her. I'm sorry, he said, breath-catching. But how did you know about the tapping? The spot to hit? She looked at him, not coldly, just measured. Then, with the faintest smile, she replied, "The designer always leaves a key under the mat. You just have to know the house." And then she was gone. No medal, no file, no salute. Only the shift she left behind in the weeks that followed. Coulter brought each new recruit to the vault, pointed to a blank panel, and said quietly, "That's the Viper point, not in the schematics. Just something to remind you the sharpest minds don't always come with stripes." Black Viper. One didn't become policy. She became the standard.